So, hello and welcome, guys, to Cyber Diaries Podcast. We have an episode number 8, and again, we have an amazing guest with us. We have Joe Heads. So, Joe, welcome to the episode, and I guess if you can do a little intro about yourself.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I really appreciate you inviting me on. Very, very privileged. And in the first 10 as well. So yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so my name's Joe. For anyone that's listening, you may have sort of seen me on LinkedIn. I post a lot about kind of leadership positions in cybersecurity and helping people with their careers and I guess giving people the advice and the knowledge of how to kind of progress in cybersecurity and kind of through what I've learned through my career.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks for coming along, Joe. I guess if we just go back in a bit and sort of cover your career trajectory. So, you started your career in recruitment, and then obviously veered into cybersecurity recruitment. I guess how come cybersecurity recruitment, or how you ended up in recruitment? Because I guess it's not something, that, oh, I'm going to finish school and I'm dreaming to be a recruiter. So, I guess
Yeah.
various people end up through various, their own paths. So how did you end up in
Yeah.
recruitment?
Yeah, good question. So I ended up working in getting a job in recruitment when I was, what was I, 19, I think at the time. So I was pretty young.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to university. I just didn't want to go down that path. And I got called out of the blue from a recruitment company and kind of said, look, this is what we do. I didn't even know recruitment existed. I didn't even know that that was a career path or an industry that you could work in. So I ended up working for a tech recruitment business when I was, 18, 19. Um, I kind of started out my career in doing like I did infrastructure and network security recruitment. So it was kind of like I kind of started out doing that, and then it kind of morphed into cybersecurity towards the end of my tenure with that business. So I worked for a big organization, and then as that kind of came to an end, I sort of started noticing a bit more of the kind of cyber talk, as it were.
Yeah.
So I ended up um, doing that more and more. And then I joined my last company, which was a company called Intasso with a guy called Ryan Surrey and Jamie Weeks, who just wanted to build a out and out cybersecurity recruitment business. So that's all they do is cybersecurity, and that's kind of how I ended up kind of really immersing myself into this market. Because as I got a lot older and a lot more experienced, I realized actually how enjoyable it was to work in this industry. And so I've been in now doing the cybersecurity side of things for six years now. I think it's about 6 or 7 years it's coming up to. But obviously, now I don't work in recruitment.
Yeah.
um, I decided that I guess recruitment for me got to a point where it was really unfulfilling. And that's not to say that people have an amazing career in doing recruitment, and there are some great recruiters out there, and the people I've worked with have been brilliant. I just got to a point where I didn't enjoy working with businesses that just weren't willing to change, and it was all very transactional, and you couldn't really help people. And through doing the industry and being now in cybersecurity industry and doing it for a number of years, I realized that actually we've got a real lack of there isn't a lack of talent, but there's a lack of I guess like leadership talent, as it were. There's like a lack of like understanding, and not just leadership like managing teams and things, but really understanding like how you can create value, how you can show that value, how you can influence people, how you can build your career. And so most recently that's kind of what I've done. I've kind of jacked in the whole recruitment thing, and now I'm working one-on-one with people in the security leadership space, really ambitious people that want to like upskill and kind of really build on their skills and have a good career. And that's what I'm doing at the moment. And so I'm doing a lot of the one-on-one stuff at the moment, which I'm really enjoying.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. I guess I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things you mentioned, that which really kind of, I guess, rings true nowadays, especially on the aspect you mentioned about recruitment can become an unfulfilling because it's hard to influence organizations to change, the one thing. And obviously sometimes, and I guess it's short-sightedness probably from their end, but we see, and obviously I've been, prominent in talking about how job descriptions are broken, or how organizations sometimes do not realize, for example, that when they try and hire security leadership, how short-sighted it is to drop a low salary, build an unrealistic job description, which normally tends to, they might hire people, but they're going to leave. So
Mm.
the goal is to lean on expertise like yourself, and hopefully, try and coach and understand. So I guess from your experience, you came up to a wall where organizations are not willing to listen.
Yeah, I guess yeah, I mean, look, and the problem is it's a big problem. And the problem that we have in the industry around organizations and businesses, they're not willing to change. They're not going to understand, that you're not going to suddenly go into an organization and completely change how they recruit people. It's just not going to happen. The problem is too big. And so I can't solve that problem. And I don't think that problem is going to go away anytime soon. I think it's
Yeah,
going to be here for a long time. Um, the problem is that cybersecurity is such a new industry and it's so nuanced, and I just don't think people aren't willing to go and learn about it. And when I've worked now in the industry for 6 years, and so I've picked up all of this knowledge and I've learned it. And when you talk to people for so many years about the same things over and over again, you start to learn what works. And so I would always try and help businesses, hire, and you kind of say, look, I'm the expert in this, like, not arrogantly, but this is what I do and I can really help you. The problem is there's so much red tape in the corporate world, it's almost impossible to change anything. And that was where I kind of got to a point. I was like, I really, really don't enjoy this anymore. I'm at the mercy of the businesses that I work for, right? If I don't, if you're working with a big organization, yes, you want to help them make a difference and make a change, but fundamentally, at the end of it, you've still got to earn a living.
yeah,
So even if you can't change the opinion of that organization, you're still going to recruit for them, right? Because you still got to earn a living, you still got to get paid, you still got to feed your family and pay your mortgage.
yeah.
And so that's then where that's what happens is you go, well, I can't change this opinion, I can't change this business, but I've still got to do my work for them. I've still got to go and do it. I'm at the mercy of the business because I need to pay my bills at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that's where it became unfulfilling, right? Because I was doing things that I didn't necessarily enjoy or I didn't believe in.
Yeah, because I totally get it. And as you say, if you are filling a role, obviously to earn a living instead of actually being fulfilling and actually hoping to make a difference for organizations, that can be. And then I just wanted to pick up on the second aspect where you mentioned earlier that I guess people sometimes, especially I guess in security, are thrust in security leadership. There's an awful lot of people that come through a technical path.
Mm,
They're very technical people. They're very great at technology. And the leadership part, or actually, reporting to the board and actually managing team, building accountability, showcasing value. Because I think we are probably at an interchange where, in a way, probably cybersecurity role is changing a bit. I think the more you can showcase value, because before cybersecurity has always been viewed as, there is a budget assigned and it's a cost center because security costs nowadays.
mm.
But I see, and I started doing it myself. The leadership see where people can showcase value, showcase determining how this project's going to save costs, how gonna save risk, how potentially even if we transform security in business development cases, we can potentially win more business. So
Yeah.
is that where you're probably leaning towards now with the new venture?
Yeah, so I guess what I've noticed in the and over the years of doing it, I think that there is like you go through, and look, being technical is important to a degree, right? And there's the whole debate, should a CISO be technical and should they not? And we've had
Yeah,
that debate rage on and it will never end. Um, I think first of all, you have to understand that technical means different things to different people. So when I think technical, the word technical and what that means, I think that's something very different to someone else who might see what the word technical is. So I think there's already a misalignment with what the word technical actually means. The kind of people, and I guess where I'm helping people at the moment is, and this is where the most success is coming from, and how I've kind of seen the market evolve, is that leads now is all about demonstrating value to the business and helping not just from like a security perspective, but how can you as a leader, and if you're being paid, a fairly good, decent sum of money. I work with some people in the US who are on a lot more, they're obviously it's uncomparable the US and the UK, but they're still earning a lot of money. Um, they're not there to just do cybersecurity. The business want to know how are you helping us hit our objectives and hit our goals, and what value are you bringing to the wider organization.
yeah,
As you go further up that chain, and naturally as you're paid a lot more, your job isn't about building firewalls and doing security architecture and design. It's about going, actually, our overarching goal of this business is to hit X amount of millions in EBITDA. Okay, well, how are you going to do that? Okay, well, another goal is we want to grow by 50% over the next 2 years. How are you going to help us do that? And so you have to like work it backwards and think, okay, why are my skills needed to help those businesses hit those goals?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's tremendous how security is, because security has been viewed as just part of IT. We
Mm,
are now transcending business units, departments. We help in, whether it's HR, whether it's finance. We need to be able to secure the whole organization and deliver value as well. So sometimes, and I think it's even transcending now, where we see sometimes security personnel, due to their technical knowledge, they sometimes immerse themselves into either CRO positions, CIO positions, or sometimes they run security as well as IT departments. So, you know, if we think about career sort of advancement strategies and what you're currently doing with CISO. So, what are the most effective strategies you think you found CISOs that could leverage by elevating their careers? Because, and I'm going into that because I think the main point is there are certain certifications or programs that people have done over the years, CISP, CISM, they all cover sort of technicalities. There's not really built leadership training as such for
mhm,
people. I know some people done MBAs because of to cover the business part, but how do we learn leadership? How we can elevate our
mm.
careers?
Yeah, good question. So I think what I'm doing at the moment, so I don't, and I guess there's a quite a good platform really to maybe talk about how I help people because I get a lot of criticism and people say, well, you've never been in security. How can you teach people to be a CISO? And I don't, and I sort of say to people, I don't teach you how to do security, right? That's
Yeah.
way above my head. I'd never claim to teach anyone to how to be a CISO. I've never walked in those shoes. I don't necessarily, I will never know that. I think what this fundamentally, there's kind of two areas that I really teach people, which is how to show value and how to communicate. Everything that you do is around communication. Your success, your failures is typically will come down to some form of communication and how you've worked with execs and stakeholders and how you position yourself in the market. And so I guess like again, the leadership is so broad, right? There are so many different things within leadership that you need to be good at. It's almost impossible to learn it from one program, one course, or one certification. I think where I've had success in helping people and what people have come to me to help with is that, okay, I know I've got all these great things I can do. I just don't know how to communicate that back. And how do I show my value proposition? And how do I use that to then negotiate a pay rise? And how do I then climb and climb the career ladder? And what does my career look like in 5 years? So I kind of help people put those pieces together in my program and everything. It's interesting actually because I designed the program that everything intertwines, so everything is linked to everything else. So showing your value proposition, well, that's connected to aligning your strategies with the business. Okay, well, aligning your strategies to the business, that's connected to how you then negotiate for the future. So everything kind of links in. But yeah, leadership is such a broad topic, and I genuinely don't believe anyone is good at everything because it's so broad.
Yeah, I think for me especially, that key aspect, communication, really stands out. And I've done a lot of mentoring with caps lock people, with some junior people, helping them in their careers. And I always say, you have to start early because, and I say always this, it's the simplest example, even in, whether you're starting out in your cybersecurity career, is that you can have an amazing idea, but unless you are able to communicate and influence
Mm,
that idea, it's never going to reach a day of light. So how do you get a buy-in in your ideas? You have to you have to well communicate, and you have to tailor the communication based on the audience. I
yeah.
always say as well,
100%.
there's so many times I've heard that CISO say, "Oh, board doesn't listen to me, or they don't, do this, they don't get budget approvals." Well, to me, that's no board problem. It's your problem because that means you didn't when it becomes once time unsuccessful, you have to change your communication tactic and
Yeah.
hopefully to get that message across. Because if there is something pertinent and you're not getting budget approval, that means either you're communicating it wrong or it's not as important to the business. But you
Yeah.
have to, you have to deal with it
Yeah, and it's because one of the things I'm working on at the moment with someone, and part of my program is that you have to change and adapt your communication style, like you say, depending on I guess the level of, and I've created a so when you're enrolled in the program, I've created a Google sheet, and it's called a stakeholder map. And you put in some numbers, and it churns you out. It's got a formula that then gives you how you should communicate with that person. Um, and it's got some like how many is it, monthly, weekly, quarterly, and it kind of gives you these things. And what I'm working on at the moment is actually, if I'm working with a security leader who's talking to me and explaining to me about their initiative, and I don't fundamentally understand any of it, I know then that there's probably a problem, and that's a barrier, because
Yep.
I would consider myself relatively switched on when it comes to business and what the kind of business languages are. And if I don't understand it, then it's exactly not going to understand it. So that's kind of what we work on and go, that's great that you've got this initiative, but let's break it down. Let's understand, what does this mean? Because you're telling me this very, very technical detail around something that I don't understand. You've got to make
Yeah.
sure, what does that
I,
actually mean in layman's terms?
I think you're absolutely right. And I think I don't remember even from where I got, I haven't built one, but I still have it in my head where, you still tailor it where you have your executives, you build the persona pages. So
Yeah.
similar as you said, the formulas, you can build the persona pages so you understand the level of technicality the people have in your C-suite and how to communicate with them. So that's very important. And we touched on a few aspects about. So I guess in your experience so far, what did you find are the key ways that CISOs can demonstrate a value, essentially, especially to non-technical executives?
Mm. So I think one of something that I teach people is that you don't need to, like, everything you do in your career, you don't have to link everything back to the business. Okay, that is not going to happen. Okay, it's something, it can be fundamentally impossible to link everything you do back to a business objective. Okay,
Yep.
but what I try and do, as I say to people, is like pick two or three things that you're really, really good at. And when I work with people, we create what I call an achievements library. So a very, very clear library of achievements that we have done over our career. And we use the situation action result method in showing tangible results and outcomes, because value is demonstrated through results and outcomes. Value is not created when you just list duties and responsibilities. Listing duties and responsibilities, anyone can do that. It doesn't show people that why you help them. So the so what I help people do and help people create, I create their achievements library, and then what we do is we work backwards. We go, right, what's the overarching business goal? And what we need to now do is look through our achievements library and work out how some of our achievements, where we've either had a success and those outcomes, how that links back into the business. And that's really, really important, because that will then resonate and speak a language to those individuals that they understand. And you're going to tap into an emotion that they understand, because every exec has their own agenda, right? Whether you're talking to a CFO who's going to be about finance, if you're talking to a COO, which is more operations, or a CEO, everyone's going to have their kind of own agenda. So I typically teach people that you just have to break it down, and I know that sounds easy to say, and it's easier to say than do, but that's the best success that the clients I'm working with have had, is just breaking it down into easy, manageable chunks, and going and looking at the links between what you're doing and the business objectives, and knowing that if you've done something that has a really good outcome and result and it doesn't impact the business, let's find something else. And so you just break all of your achievements down and you do that, and that's something that's worked really well. Value, if you can demonstrate value for your outcomes and results, you can negotiate on a more pay, you can negotiate on job offers, and you can ultimately climb the kind of corporate ladder a lot quicker.
Yeah, and I think that really ties in well. I remember, we discussing people, when you review their CVs, it's kind of similar thing as well. Lots of people, when they write their CVs, all they do is list their responsibilities normally,
Yeah.
or list, very, yeah, it's usually responsibilities. But when you can say, what have you done and what the achievements you have achieved or how this transformed business, put tangible goals,
Yeah.
because that's what really I think transforms, and especially when you move into leadership. I always tell people, how to transform a sentence, because you say, I use the vulnerability tool, that doesn't tell me much. But when you put a
Yeah.
sentence saying, I use vulnerability tool, which allowed our organization to reduce the vulnerabilities by 20%, therefore reducing the risk of the organization by something
Yeah.
that can be measured, it just the whole sentence changes.
It
It's
changes, right? And it
yeah.
and it completely changes. It changes so many things psychologically as well. It changes like when someone reads that, and it's the same on your LinkedIn profile. If everything has like an outcome and result, it changes the perception of who you are. It makes you immediately more senior. It makes you more talented. It's all of these kind of psychological things that are so important. And so when you go into then demonstrate that value, you can lean back on all of these results and outcomes, and you can start to really create some very, very powerful value propositions that you can then use as leverage, right? Because you can then leverage that for your own gain, whether that be, like I say, a salary increase, a promotion, but also leverage it as well for your strategies. So when you're putting in for headcount and resource and budget, again, you can leverage these outcomes to show that actually these are the outcomes I can have for you if you give me the right tools and resources.
Yeah, I think, and especially I remember when you guys had a chat with Keith Price as well. He was talking about, how it's important, especially when you come in a new organization, to build relationships because you're building sort of an emotional connection and bank for when you need stuff. Because
Yeah,
obviously you come in and allowing people to, similar to what I do, sometimes you are in a small organization where you might not have resources, but allowing you to help other people in different departments essentially will build an emotional connection. But not only that, whether you then use it as cybersecurity, some kind of forum or stuff, it allows you to gain support for your initiatives across the business, which can
yeah,
be, invaluable. So I think, the more you can support the business and help it, the more the more
yeah.
you will achieve.
Exactly. And also you have to remember that like in most organizations, unless you're like a security consultancy or a tech consultancy, 99% of the people working for the business have no idea about cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And so when you kind of think actually most of the organization have no idea what I'm doing, there's no point you then leaning on all of your cybersecurity languages and all that kind of tech talk because no one's going to understand it. And actually, when I chatted to Keith and I did an interview with him, I loved the piece that he was like, I just went and when I first joined his current business, I think he was like, I went and met marketing, HR, sales, everybody across the business I went to go and meet because I was like, if I can help them, even if I don't have necessarily the skills in that area, but I can help them with something or deliver a project or have like a different view on it or some advice I can give them, that's going to build some really good allies in the business as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's one of those lessons that I've taken myself. Where for example, I'm quite technical guy, so I'm happy to use automation, Power Automate, and all of these tools in our organization. So we built some training modules for every department because if I can improve someone's efficiency basically for the business, not only I'm building an ally, but I'm helping business to do things more
Mm.
efficiently and hopefully saving someone time.
Yeah,
So they
100%.
saving time on their day-to-day job, and hopefully, they can spare 5 minutes to actually read a security newsletter, which hopefully
Yeah.
they'll learn more about security and be more and help secure the business better.
Yeah. And then they realize actually, oh, actually Marius isn't just you're not just a tech guy trying to disrupt things and be annoying. You're like actually enabling them to do their job better and more efficiently, right? So they're going to be like, oh, Marius is actually helping us, like, and naturally that's going to build allies and friendships, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the goal. And then if we circle back to coaching and helping CISOs, you know, can you share without naming names any recent transformational stories where someone has completely transformed their career, got a promotion, or actually negotiated an amazing salary?
Yeah.
How's been the successes so far?
Yeah, so far it's been good. I think one of my favorite successes is the value proposition and the system that I've created that helps people, communicate the value proposition. So again, part of the program is that I've created lots of these systems. So it's like frameworks and systems that ultimately you don't just use it now, you take them away and you continue to use it. And one of the things I always say to everyone is in security, it's funny because like X doesn't equal Y, it's doing X over and over and over and over and over and over again, you might equal Y.
Yeah,
So like it's a real consistency piece. And one of the things I'm most proud of I was working with a gentleman, or I am still actually. We've got a few sessions left. I'm working with a gentleman in New York, um, and he was having a really hard time, with his value proposition. He'd unfortunately, actually, during the time that we were working together, his company just, they didn't exist anymore. They effectively went bankrupt. And he was like, right, I've got to get on it pretty quickly. Anyway, we worked together on some strategies, and he ended up getting a job offer. Um, Using the value proposition, we managed to work. I worked with him to then get an increase in $50,000 because we linked everything in his value proposition back to what the outcomes were of the organization. And I was like, you need to know what the business that you've offered you the job. Let's go through everything together. Let's work out exactly, you know, where your value is going to lie. Let's get some tangible metrics and numbers and really, really push on that salary piece. So yeah, he went in from I think he was a head of before, and then he went into a director of security role. So yeah, very, very pleased. He sent me an email, and I was extremely happy that like it works. It was kind of like an eye-opening moment, right? It was like it works, like the whole piece around value and communicating that value in a way that the business understand, it works.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was, and I guess you going from working for someone, working for yourself, and that's your baby you are creating, that the positive support and the feedback, I guess, can overcome anything that's negative. So, but I guess if we circle around a bit, it's obviously it's amazing story, but how do you find founding, running, something, running and building your own baby? Obviously, there's something that, I guess you can't really be taught. You just have to jump in deep and
Yeah.
and find and obviously
Yeah.
cover with it. So how do you finding it so far?
It's hard, mate. It's really difficult, and I don't shy away from that. And I think there's this kind of I don't know, there's this kind of like when people start their own businesses, it's it seems so amazing, and oh my God, you're starting your business, you're like how brilliant, you must be, you have to have loads of money and in the bank and all this kind of stuff, and it just makes me chuckle, and I'm like, nope, like it's really, really difficult. And I think to anyone that's like started their own business, I have like a newfound appreciation for it, because you have really good days, and I have some days I'm like, yeah, I'm smashing it today, had a really good day, got loads of work done, and then there's other days where it's like I just have the worst imposter syndrome ever. And I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Like, this is ridiculous. Why can't I go and get a normal job? Why can't I just go and work for someone else, get paid a good salary, be happy, and just, retire and when I get to 80 or whatever it'll be. Um, but then there's like the flip side of it is that actually most people, 99% of the people I work with are so supportive of it. And when you do help people and you see like you're really genuinely making a difference and you're helping people succeed and you're, you know, not necessarily changing someone's life, but helping people negotiate good salaries and helping them climb the career ladder, you are having like a really big impact. It's really, really fulfilling. And I would, I'm I'm very happy that I decided to leave kind of the recruitment world and do this, because you just build real relationships with people. You spend 3 months working with someone, you get to know them pretty well. Like
Yeah.
they trust you and you trust them, and you talk about things that you wouldn't otherwise talk about with people, and they help you in some ways, and then you can help them in other ways, and it just like there's just such a realness to it. But yeah, no doubt it's extremely difficult knowing that I'm not going to get paid at the end of the month.
Yeah, I don't remember which episode was. I was talking with one of the founders as well, and he said, "Imagine what it's like being a founder is that you hear at least 100 no's every day, and you're getting smacked in the face constantly for 6 months until you come out of on the other end." But the
Yeah.
thing is, I think usually it takes a certain person, and you have to. I guess you have to persevere in whatever comes at you. But those who come out on the other end, I think that's where success is. But because you obviously, I think you go through learning. Obviously, you start somewhere being one man band. Once you
Mm,
build it out, obviously, sometimes being a founder, obviously, you will put all your heart and soul in it, and then people sometimes forget that no one's going to be as passionate about your baby as you will be.
yeah.
So it's about then it becomes the next learning curve about how you're hiring people and how to
Yeah.
manage
Well,
expectations.
Yeah, and I think yeah, like I say, I think like it's one of those things that I don't know I can't remember the exact quote, and I might not be actually even making a quote of anything, but it's kind of like the story of like normally what happens at the beginning is everyone doubts you and everyone criticizes you, and then you have none of these supporters, but you keep pushing, you keep pushing, you keep going, you keep doing the right things. If you know you're doing a good job and you just keep pushing through. And then eventually what happens is all the people that doubted you before and then didn't want to see you necessarily succeed, they come back around in full cycle and they go, oh, I want to be part of that. I want you to help me now. And so that's kind of what I think about, which is really difficult to always think about because there is a lot of negativity. And I think there is a lot of when you certainly start your own business, I think the negatives do outweigh the positives. And I know that's, some people might disagree, but the negatives certainly outweigh the positives until you get to a certain where you've pushed so hard and keep doing what you're doing and helping people. And then eventually the positives then outweigh the negatives, right?
Yeah, I think, well, yeah, that's the thing. I guess when until you come out on the other end, we touched a few things here on sort of, I guess, building relationships, and that's really, that really resonates with me, and I think especially now since we go back from COVID, even though obviously I'm not against Zoom calls and all that is amazing, but actually going and participating in events and
Mm,
meeting physical people face to face can really help build relationships. So I guess, rounding on off of that, how do you think, or what role does networking play in CISO's career advancement? Because in a way, sometimes, obviously, you'll know probably from your own experience that sometimes I even think like there's no point applying to CISO roles because
mm,
every position normally is filled with a network of peers that and usually it's like even in the UK because it's a much smaller market. Is
yeah.
sometimes when CISO leaves, it's sort of like a musical chairs movement because once leaves,
Yeah.
somebody else
Yeah.
jumps into that
We,
chair, and then somebody else replaces them in their chair and stuff like that.
Yeah, we used to call it. So when I used to hire, senior level positions and CISOs, there was a term. So you go through like movers and shakers. They would be called the movers and shakers because if the market was really good and more CISOs were moving position, naturally more opportunity then gets created. When the market's down, no one's moving. So
Yeah.
then where does the opportunity come from? Um, so look, I think networking does play a part in your success in the security leadership space and as you kind of progress through the ranks. But I think the problem is that networking isn't about how many, it's about how meaningful. And so what I see a lot of people do is they think that by going to these big conferences or just by turning up to an event that they're suddenly gonna that's what networking is. Well, networking is actually far deeper than that, and you're better off being a bit more specific with the people you want to meet and have actually network with purpose and not just meeting one person at an event and having a really good conversation. It's then what do you do after that? Do you follow up? Do you actually have those conversations? What are you doing to help them? Because if someone has got something you want, what are you going to do to try and get that, right? Which is, okay, I need to do something for them. I need to show that I can help them as much as they can kind of help me. So yes, I think networking does play a part in it, but I think the problem is that things like infosec, right? I mean, it's chaos. I've been so many years, it's madness. And it just like, unless you're going to meet with very, very specific people and you're targeting those individuals and you're booking in meetings before going and, finding out who's going, just turning up to infosec isn't networking, you
No,
know?
no, you're absolutely right, and I think it's very important to say that quality over quantity, and that's the thing. That's why, as you just mentioned, I try and avoid the big conferences. Yeah, there's sometimes some good stuff you to go and see your friends, but good networking comes, I guess, in more intimate events where you have roundtables, where you have maybe it's even vendor organized dinner, but you can preview attendance before. So if you have, for example, I like to mix and match. So, I go to Sans CISO networking events normally. You get to meet, I guess, variety because you meet
Yeah,
people like, say, um, HSBC CISO. They obviously have their CISO sort of, they have probably 700 employees where I'm managing six or seven, so
yeah, yeah,
learning scale and obviously how these people operate in different obviously levels. It's fascinating to learn from them. So
yeah.
just, as you say, just going and saying hi to someone and adding on LinkedIn and never talking to them. That's not really
That's
networking,
not
is it?
networking. And also it goes back to like what I said earlier. It's like networking is a consistency thing. There's no point going to one event once and thinking it's going to happen. That's just not the way it works. You've got to be consistent with it. You've got to be quite strategic with the relationships you want to build. Um, so I think, yeah, look, networking definitely plays a part, but you've got to do it properly and you've got to have a bit of a plan around it, right? You've got to have a bit of a, this is what I want to get out of it. These are the people I want to meet, and this is how I'm going to kind of, go about it.
Yeah. We talked a bit about creating value. I guess on a flip side of a proposition, I guess value is well is probably you can generate some form of it through new work, but normally you generate value while you have a position. But I
Yeah.
guess when you want, or if you're thinking about moving or finding a new role, the personal brand building becomes much more important than value proposition. So do you work with your clients, or you have thought about how personal branding can elevate their potential chances of opportunity?
Yeah, so do you know what? I was actually having this conversation with a client last week. I don't necessarily think that personal branding, personal branding is important, but I don't think it's the one thing that you need that's going to set you apart from everyone else. And the reason I say that is because I've seen it before where if especially in the more senior space, so if you are looking to go, to a very, very senior CISO level position, that personal branding piece normally isn't much of a barrier because let's say you're already in a good CISO position working for a good company. That alone in itself is probably going to get you the conversation, right? And that's why it's always difficult. There's kind of a fine, it's kind of, unfortunately, it's a bit of a warped view. You get to, yes, when you're starting out, it's important. You want to be known and you want to, build up all these achievements and results that we kind of discussed earlier. But then when you get to a certain level, that kind of you don't need that because you're already at that level. Once you get to kind of senior CISO level, you're going to be getting called and by the headhunters, by the executive search firms, and you're going to have those relationships in place. I think one thing that personal branding for me is and why it's important isn't necessarily because you're going to suddenly have loads of job offers because you've got a good personal brand, right? You've still got to be you still got to be good at your job, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
still got to be able to prove yourself and be good at your job. But I think what's really important is that, and what I love seeing, yourself and other people out there is like creating like it's really like strong community, and the more we talk about it, the more we talk about cybersecurity, the more it's in the hearts and minds of people and businesses, the more our industry is going to grow. So I think like if you're thinking about personal branding, I would see it as more of like the impact you can have on the industry as a whole, rather than it being like straight away you're going to have loads of job offers because you're posting a few LinkedIn posts, right? I think there's got to be a bigger reason behind it than that. But I do think it's important. Um, but again, just having a really good personal brand isn't going to, you can't assume that just by having a good personal brand, you're going to then get job offers and get more money because that doesn't work. You've still got to be good at your job, like I said.
yeah. I think there's a few probably distinct differences here, and I'm just going to say as well. I think you touched on it's a very important point that normally I think people who, especially in cybersecurity, I think when you reach a certain leadership positions, there's a lot of people that I think have altruistic motives, and they want to
Okay.
make the industry better. And I think
Yeah.
therefore building that personal brand, helping hopefully, communities and smaller businesses, to, hopefully take a little bit of, or even a small step towards understanding cybersecurity and hopefully sharing, your knowledge, your novel ways of how to achieve initiatives. And I think secondly is, I think CISO, there's obviously now separating, there's a few new variety of CISO roles. So you have CISO roles where you work for, you trying to secure a business. But now there is this new breed of CISOs who work for cybersecurity vendors who are not really doing a CISO work, but they come from industry with a big reputation, and they are now popularizing specific vendors and their tools. And they're talking, they're normally doing a lot of presentations because they are CISO. So I think,
Yeah, there's lots of those. Yeah, the kind of the field CISO, right? I've seen
yeah,
that, the field CISO, where like let's not shy away from it, right? It's a sales role ultimately.
yeah,
It's there to give the customers of the vendors the confidence. And I've had some conversations with people like that, and they are, they do a really good job in terms of like, because what they try and do as well is like help build the product as well, make sure that the product is the right for the market, and they come from industry, and it's not like they've kind of gone through their career and not had a single CISO role, right, and then gone into these vendors. But yeah, no, there's quite a few different kind of variations, I guess. And I think there's going to be more variations as time goes on. We're going to see it happen more, and there's going to be these, yeah, different, I guess, different subsets of what the CISO is ultimately.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, we touched about a bit about value proposition, but also I wanted to get your views. What are the, or, some key negotiation tactics that CISOs can use in potentially securing a a salary boost either through, their own company or through a potential move. How else can they leverage that, potentially?
Yeah, so I think it probably comes back to, I kind of touched on it earlier, is I teach a lot of people in on my program, which is there's kind of a bit of a system that you need to follow if you're looking at negotiating in the future. And that is that if you just decide that you're just going to go in all guns blazing and ask for a pay rise, that's probably not going to work. The chances are your employer is going to turn around and say, sorry, we can't do that. And then you're going to leave and you're going to find another job. And that's great. However, if you want to stay in the business you're working in, you've got lots more to give and you've got lots to offer, you kind of have to um, follow a bit of a process, which is understand the business first and foremost, understand what the goals are of the organization, where they are financially, what the overarching objectives are, and you work that out. And then what you want to do is obviously try and align and make sure that your strategies and the value that you bring and the why your skills are helping the business do that. And that's really, really important, because the why is more important than the what and the how. Everyone knows that. What and how you do what you do and how you do it is easy to explain. Why you do something is a lot harder. So you create that why, and then what you look to do is actually do the work. So prove that you've got this. Your initiative is going to help that and have that outcome and result, and then you can negotiate. So I think, like, in terms of like negotiating tactics, I think you just have to make sure that you've got enough evidence and you've proven that you are the right person in delivering clear like strategy that is helping the business hit those goals. And as long as you can articulate that through some of the other stuff that we've spoken about, through your communication strategies and making sure that that communication is aligned to whatever stakeholder that might be. Your boss might be the CFO, you might report to a CFO, COO, just making sure that you resonate with them on an emotional level and you're hitting their agendas. And then, of course, there's lots of different, like, I'm sure, people go on Google and look up negotiation strategies, but there's lots of things you can do in terms of like just negotiating, and all the little kind of funny tactics that you can use, right? And, things like fear of loss is a big one, right? And all of these things. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you've got to be able to prove that why your skills are important and almost make it feel like without me, without having you there, the business won't succeed. And that's what you want to make people feel like, right?
Yeah, I think it's important. Sometimes people forget is you have to showcase value, and you have to showcase wish to do better for organization, because sometimes people go into negotiation tactics saying that, it's either salary increase or I'm going.
Yeah.
And that can be viewed very, very
Very
wrongly
bad.
from,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm working with someone at the moment, and I won't mention any more because but we're working together because he knows that he wants to stay within his organization, but he just wants to get paid a little bit more and look for that promotion, and we're going to negotiate on a few things. So he's starting the process early. This isn't we work on one session, we have one session, then a week later he goes and negotiates. It doesn't work like that. You've kind of got to think to yourself, right, if you've just started a new job, especially, you've kind of got to like plan it out that in 12 months time is when you should probably negotiate, because 12 months is long enough to go, okay, I can start to prove my value and what I'm doing and the worth that I bring, and then I can negotiate. People that just kind of go blindly into saying, well, I want more money, and it's like, okay, well, we're not going to give you any more money. Okay, well, I'm going to leave. All right, brilliant, leave. We'll find someone else, and so it just doesn't work. And so,
yeah, it's
like I say, you
definitely
have
not the
to
way.
like follow the process of like, you have to be showing that you can do the job well and that you're contributing to the success of the organization.
Yeah. we talked a lot about, the coaching and how we were helping, security leaders, I guess. Another question, so are you only working with senior leadership? How about someone who is maybe not at the, very high leadership level, but they're looking to work and progress into leadership positions? Are you working with people who are thinking about progressing their careers and how they can build that sort of step and ladders towards
Yeah.
leadership?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess the types of people I work with are people who are quite ambitious, either leading now at a kind of mid-level, maybe junior leaders, or people that want to be leaders. And actually really interesting that a lot of the people I work with, obviously, are now, I don't work with really, really senior CISOs anymore because actually you're already probably at the level that other people want to be at.
Yeah.
So now the people I work with are kind of that mid-level, management, people that want to one day be a CISO, right? Like,
Yeah.
absolutely, if that's on your goals. I'm working with someone else who's got a really clear mindset. He's like, I want to be a CISO in X amount of years. Um, and so yes, I can help with the kind of understanding of the skills that you would need for that. But yeah, the most people I work with are kind of those middle people that are really ambitious, that really, really want to be a leader one day, that want to help just understanding the nuances and, like I say, building really good value propositions, really pushing themselves to like be in these bigger roles. And that's the kind of people I work with.
Okay, brilliant. And then some of our listeners, if they are in that sort of position and they're really ambitious about their career plans and career growth, how can they interact with you? How they can find, you? I know you published recently a book as well. So how can they find some of the resources and work with you?
Yeah. Yeah, so if you head over to, you can message me on LinkedIn. Yeah, absolutely. I do my best to try and get back to everyone. I do get quite a lot of messages, but like feel free to message me on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in my program, we normally book like a 15-minute clarity call to make sure it's right for you. I give you all of the information and you can make a real educated guess, educated decision whether it's for you. If you want things like my products that are kind of coming out and some of the material and things that I'm building to really help people, and obviously the reason I'm building them is to make it more accessible because a lot of the training and formal training is expensive, right? And people that are just coming into the industry, you're not going to have that kind of money. But yeah, if you want any of that, just sign up to my newsletter, and and you can do that on my LinkedIn. So you sign up to my newsletter, and I interact with everyone every Saturday. I write my newsletter with stories and lessons and things I've learned, kind of working with leaders and skills and how you can progress your career. And yeah, you'll get all the updates on the products and stuff as well from there.
So brilliant. We're rounding up another amazing episode 8 with Joe Head. So thank you very much for coming along, Joe. I think from what I've seen and from what you've done, I think, your new business is going to be a resounding success. I think that the key point is you are, I think, in a community and in the industry that are very supportive. So hopefully those of us who are listening, who needs help in their career advancement will reach out and, support and sign up to your newsletter. And hopefully, I wish you every success in the future.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's been great chatting, and yeah, I wish you all the success as well with all your things. I hope this podcast